All right, welcome to the program. Welcome to the program. Why am I not hearing myself? Can you hear me okay?
I'm hearing you.
Yeah? I don't hear a thing. I am not hearing anything. That's turned on. But you can hear me.
I can hear you.
All right, if you can hear me, I'll keep on talking. That's,
How about now?
there we go. Try now. Was
Hear
everybody
yourself
hearing me, or was I sound like a total idiot? Nobody was hearing
now? The
me.
stream heard you, but
The streamer was hearing me, but nobody out there in Radio Land was hearing me because the button, a little button way up there at the top, was poked off. So now the button is poked on. Thank God Tim was sitting here, and Big Tim was sitting here in the studio, and he diagnosed the problem and he resolved the situation immediately. So we are back on the air. And hi, Mayor. How you doing?
I'm well, Barry. I'm glad you're audible now.
Did you push that button?
Where you were. I haven't touched anything.
Okay.
I have not touched anything. Don't let me near the control panel.
Don't push that button. Well, welcome to the program, everybody. It's Midweek with the Mayor. We're going to have the Mayor twice, actually, this week, because tomorrow was the State of the City.
Indeed.
A huge event.
Yeah.
And a chance for the Mayor to address the public. And we're going to broadcast it live, as we generally do. And not only that, I'm going to bring my entire show on the road tomorrow. We're going to be at New Bedford High School for the speech. It's generally at Evoke. Why is it New Bedford High School this year?
Well, it hasn't been in any one place for a long time. For a number of years, the last few years, we hadn't moved it, and we just thought it was time to, to try somewhere else. Not that the way it worked at Folk Tech was objectionable at all. They did a fabulous job. It's just, I think these events do need to move around the city. When I first got into office, we were doing them down at the Fisherman's Club on Orchard Street. Then we moved it up to Folk Tech. I know that with previous administrations, they had done them at Cafe Funchal and some other places. I suspect it wouldn't surprise me at all if they were done from time to time at New Bedford High School. So it's good to mix it up and move it around from time to time. But it's also good to get people into New Bedford High to see it for themselves. I mean, in the last few years, I think, there's been this, somewhat unfair portrayal of the school, and the place has come a long way, and it's good that we're going to have some 500 or so people in the gym to take a look at the place for themselves, and it'll be a good event. You and I were just talking off air about how it's a bigger event in New Bedford than it is in a lot of other places. In many cities, the State of the City address is just an exercise in the mayor going in front of an audience of supporters and department heads and giving just sort of a rundown of things, and it's usually not that well attended. In New Bedford, it's an event. There's usually around 500 people, as there will be this year. I think they maxed out on tickets, although if you're still out there and you need a ticket, call the Chamber of Commerce. They host it, and maybe they can fit you in. I know some people cancel at the last moment, so don't give up. But it's well attended by all three of our TV stations, 6, 10, and 12. Obviously, BSM will be there. You'll be there with bells on, the newspaper.
Well, I don't know about bells, but maybe a few whistles. But
you'll get your hair done for it.
I might actually put on something other than jeans. I don't know. Who knows?
But it's and it's an occasion for us us collectively, and it isn't just about the mayor. It's about the city, and it's an occasion for the city to take stock in its accomplishments and not for the purpose of celebrating how great we think we are, but an exercise in taking stock and saying, look, we've been successful. Just take a look at the evidence of success, and to build, and this is the important part, to build confidence on those wins, right? Because that's how cities come together and get more stuff done, and they feel like, yeah, we can get up and do something. You and I were just talking about it again off air a moment ago, how cities that have low self-esteem always think that somebody has to do something for them. It's a sort of an entitlement mentality. We're getting beyond that now in New Bedford. We don't, the mantra here isn't, if only so and so built this or the state did this for us. We're getting beyond that. We're saying, okay, what's next? What are we going to do next? And that's a big. It's been a big change in the city, and the more that we can do that, the bigger, the stronger the city will be in the long run.
All right. So, any important themes that you want to give us maybe a hint or two about?
Well, that's one of them for sure. It's the idea that, you know, cities that succeed don't passively sit back and wait for things to happen to them. They initiate the action, and that's what we've been doing. And that we, you know, that's been a theme in a number of my speeches because I think it's really important. We have the power in our hands to make our city stronger. We certainly want good partnerships with the state and the federal government. They are partners. They are not saviors. We're going to chart our own course, and that's the way that we should look at things. And that's been the approach, and it's working. I mean, if you look at the growth in the city, if you look at the decline in crime, if you look at the stability of the city's finances, if you look at, you know, what our work in the school system, all of those things need more work. The work of building a city is never completed, but we've made progress. There's just no denying it. If you look at the data, if you look at just with your own two eyes at the city and things being built and things being tackled and accomplished and cleaned up, you know, we have a lot to be proud of. And it's not just the mayor doing it; it's all of us jumping on board. And that's when you have that kind of level of, you know, teamwork and understanding and purpose, then good things happen.
I know you had a big announcement on the waterfront this morning, and I want to get to that in just a moment. But any big announcements expected tomorrow? I mean, usually the state of the.
You want me to reveal them all? You don't want?
Well, you know, just give us a little hint. You know, something that I'm going to have
do
a major
sign
announcement
language.
on this.
That's not visible on radio.
Well, you're on video camera right now.
Oh yes, that's right.
We're live on YouTube.
I keep forgetting all these cameras you have pointed at. 1, 2, 3.
It's like being in Walmart's parking lot, right?
It is. It is. I feel like I'm under surveillance. So, you know, there will be some things of note concerning the port, concerning the airport, concerning, you know, we'll certainly talk about the school system. We're going to have a set of superintendent finalists announced tonight. So there'll be something to talk about there. I'm obviously, you know, there's a lot of process to go between now and the time we select. So it's, you know, it'll be my talking about what I think we should be looking for in a superintendent. And, you know, I mean, there'll probably be a couple of other things in there that'll be, you know, newsworthy. But, you know, what I try to get people to understand is, in these speeches is that, you know, I mean, there are two facets. One is, you know, what we've done and why that means that we can be confident in tackling the big stuff, and then what's the strategy going forward. And with the strategy going forward, and cities, I mean, this is really important. Cities have to be entrepreneurial, and I know that's sort of an overused term these days, but, you know, you have to think like, you know, think about how cities compete in the world, because that's what we do, and we have to compete. And if we don't compete well, then the means to do all the things that we want won't be available. The city has a history of that, right? So that, you know, and we've seen it. We saw it in Whaling. Our city saw it with textiles. I mean, think about what happened with textiles here. They were so concentrated in textiles in the 1920s, and then when the Great Depression hit, it all fell apart, and there was nothing to fall back on, and the city was in a deep, deep hole. People back then, I think, can be fairly criticized for not thinking about how what steps needed to be taken to build a more diversified economy, to you know, to attract different kinds of businesses here, and to build a more sustainable city. Right before the term sustainable became in vogue, that's really what, you know, cities were doing. The successful ones, the ones that got through it, the ones that didn't get through it so well, including New Bedford, weren't thinking in those terms. So, you know, it's incumbent upon us to do that. And I think it's the State of the City address is a prime opportunity for us to come together and talk about the long term, because that's the business we're in. We're in the long-term business. We have to deal with things and provide services in the short term, you know, deal with things as, you know, as common as the storm we're about to get in the next couple of days. That's the short-term stuff. But it's the long-term stuff that sustains cities, the planning, the taking, you know, investing in things, making sure they're financially stable, making sure people feel like they're part of the team. That's what makes cities go.
So this is one of the big formalities of being mayor, being governor, being president, you know,
Yeah.
big state of assessing the state, where we've been and where we're going.
And you know, it is. Let me just tell you what's different here. And the way I write the speech, frankly, is
which is almost done. He told me off here.
yeah, it is.
Almost
yeah,
done.
yeah. I'm not this.
Going
I'm
to finish
not,
it up
I'm
on
not,
Christmas Eve.
No,
right?
I'm not. No, unlike the inaugural that I gave a couple of months ago, this isn't a cramming session. I'm pretty much done.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's good.
Yeah.
Really
Real
good.
good.
Really good. But no, I mean, one of the things that I do is I try. I mean, those speeches. I've never been to a State of the Union speech. I've been to a couple of State of the Commonwealth speeches, and those speeches. I've been to a few of those now. I mean, they're all geared toward applause lines. Like the more applause,
Right.
I'm not saying that I don't want people to applaud me tomorrow. But
I'll clap for you.
Please. I'll let the one person in the back, right?
Remember Jeb Bush? Please clap.
Please clap. No, but I don't write it that way because I want people to be thinking about what I'm saying and not just like, oh, let's stand up and applaud for that, because it just breaks everything up. You know, maybe I'm a bad politician in that way, but I do want people to, you know, to focus in on what I'm trying to say and internalize, and not have to be standing up every 3 or 4 minutes. I mean, anybody can put a bunch of punchlines in a speech and have somebody in the audience start the clapping, which is kind of what's done in places. Right. And but
I mean, it's
don't want
fake
to do that.
speeches, fake news, fake.
Yeah. So you know, it's so we work hard to make sure that it's a good presentation.
All right, we'll have it live on Wednesday, on Thursday, and if you miss it on Thursday, we'll have it on the best of on Sunday too, so people can hear it.
Good.
Twice, and
Good.
it'll be on our website and
Good.
everything else. So, you and the Harbor Development Commission got together on the Chile waterfront this morning to make an announcement about the future of the Port of New Bedford. What's up?
Yeah. So this is a big day. You know, so we've. We're no longer, the punchline is we're no longer the Harbor Development Commission. We're the New Bedford Port Authority, right? We changed the name. The commission did, all of us collectively, to reflect, to have a name that bespeaks the magnitude and stature of the Port of New Bedford. It's a big, successful port, a complex port, a very diversified port, and you know, for a long time, the HDC has operated more or less like a traditional harbor master, right? You just keep the boats going, make sure everybody's got their mooring tied up and things are safe. And, you know, that's appropriate for smaller places, for towns. It's not appropriate for a place that is the largest commercial fishing port in the United States, that has double-digit growth in cargo tonnage, that is, you know, has for the first time in a long time, a waiting list for its largest marina, and which is about to become the launching pad for the American offshore wind industry, and happens to have a ferry service with 100,000 passengers a year. This is a big place, and this is an effort really in the port putting on its big boy pants and saying, you know what? This is
what does it mean? Explain to people like me listening right now. What does it mean? What's the difference between Harbor Development Commission and Port Authority? What's the big difference? How does it impact me?
So functionally, nothing. We don't take on. There are no additional legal authority associated with that. But the name change, I think, speaks to the way we look at ourselves, which is this is not just a sort of a harbor development. There are towns that have harbor development commissions. Big ports have port authorities, and we're calling ourselves a port authority. Most of the statutory powers associated with a port authority we already have, right? They've been in place for a long time. The other thing.
What's the difference? I mean, that's what I'm trying to understand. What's the difference between a Harbor Development Commission and a port authority? You said most of the establishment that we need to be a port authority is already in place. What does it take to be a port authority?
Well, you need to be created by statute. So the
Okay.
Harbor Development Commission was created by an act of the Massachusetts legislature in 1957 that gave the entity the authority to manage the wharves and city-owned waterfront property, and it has certain authority. It can borrow money. It's run by a commission. It can charge fees for different services and so forth, and that it's not subject to appropriation by the city council. So it operates somewhat separately from city government. And it's chaired by the mayor. So those are the statutory attributes of the Harbor Development Commission.
Okay.
we're doing this rebranding because Harbor Development Commission just sounds too small time. And this is a big time port, and to highlight the fact that it is big, and it's not just for us but for the rest of the world, we want to call it something that is more becoming of a big port. The other big news today is that for the first time, if not ever, then in a long time, this agency, the New Bedford Port Authority, has a strategic plan, which I don't know if we got your copies of it, but
No.
if we didn't, we'll make sure you get that, Barry.
Okay.
But it's really what's really important is that that the agency have a course. It is a strategic plan for an economic development agency, and that's what it is. It isn't just this harbor master agency. So what does that mean? It means that its first business is to provide really good services to users of the port. So when you think about what ports are, they're transfer points, right? It's the transfer point between land and sea. They're transfers of people, right? Of ferry service or other maritime activity in which people are moving, or goods, right? Fish, cargo, and so forth. So, so we want to make sure that the services we provide, whether it's port security or maintaining the docks or the launch service or any of that stuff, that we're providing the best possible services. We also want to be in the business of making sure that we're a really strong advocate for, especially for the commercial fishing industry, which we've done, and you and I've talked about this. My testimony a couple of times before Congress last year, and creating the National Coalition of Fishing Communities, and the work with NOAA on Sector 9, all these things that we do, we've got to do that and more so. We need to be seen as the place that speaks for the fishing industry, because so much of the fishing industry is here now on the East Coast. I mean, we've got, and we've talked about it before, we've had a 67% increase in the number of out-of-state boats that have come here in the last 3 years. That's pretty significant. They're leaving other ports. Sometimes they go back for the winter, but they're doing their business here. And then there's, offshore wind is coming. That is something that we have to be. We need to make sure that we're doing everything that allows them to succeed here and coexist successfully with the fishing industry. And I think there's some work that has to be done in that way by the wind developers to make sure that they are hearing the fishing industry better than they have up to this point. And then there's certainly things that we can be doing in the way of marketing, right? We started a marketing program for New Bedford seafood last year, and we need to put some more money behind that. I think that having a strategic plan where we know we can manage our revenue better will allow us to do some direct marketing. I mean, if you think about it, you hear ads for, Maine lobster and Maryland crab and Alaskan seafood and Gulf shrimp. Why aren't we talking about New Bedford, whatever, scallops or New Bedford seafood more generally? That needs to be a brand that's out there. And it amazes me when I go out, even in our own state, and there are people who don't know that New Bedford is the biggest commercial fishing port in America. And they think, they
don't learn that through osmosis. We're going to tell them about it, right?
Well, yeah, that's why I tell people about it. I constantly tell people about it because they need to know that. It's a very important fact for people to know about this region and the city in particular. And you get people who say, especially in the Boston area, think, oh yeah, you're like Gloucester. Gloucester's bigger though, right? Like, are you out of your mind? Our landings are 8 times the size of Gloucester. They're not comparable ports. So we need to tell the world that. We need to be better at self-promotion, frankly, and that's part of this plan.
There is a piece of legislation. I just wrote a blog about this a couple of weeks ago. A piece of legislation that would help Massachusetts communities better brand themselves and the state in marketing products, marketing things that they do. So
yeah, it's not that much money. It won't be that much money. They have one specifically for seafood. We'll use it. We've applied for the grants, but it's not nearly enough. We're not in one of the things in the when we talk about self-sufficiency and taking action. As a city, we've gotten out of the business of just waiting for the next state grant opportunity. I mean, that's not the way to do business. We've got plans, and we know when there's an opportunity to help fund those plans from the state, we'll seize those opportunities. But we're not just lurching back and forth between grant cycles. You can't. That's not the way to operate. We're going to put money behind it. That's generated from all the services that we do in the port. It's not taxpayer dollars, and so that we can continue to grow the port. It's going to grow more, and that's exciting. The Port of New Bedford generates, according to a state-funded study that was done last year, generates 2% of the state's gross domestic product. And when you think about all the industries in Massachusetts, when people from afar think of Massachusetts, they think about financial services like Fidelity, they think about the healthcare, the hospitals in Boston, they think about technology and biotech and all that stuff in the Boston area. Well, I'll tell you what, the Port of New Bedford has a chunk of that economy that's often, the overall state economy that's often overlooked. We want to make sure that we continue to drive that, and we're known for it.
All right, let's switch gears just a little bit. Councillor Gomes has an item on tomorrow night's council agenda looking for the city to pursue legal action against pharmaceutical companies and doctors who might be responsible for advancing the opioid crisis. This has become a popular thing. I know Fall River's done it, and other cities and states across the country have done it as well. Is this something you would support?
It depends. So I'm glad he raised it. I mean, frankly, we've been looking at that for, I'd say, the last 3 or 4 months. Internally, our solicitor's office has looked at it. We've talked to a number of law firms that have reached out to us and offered their service. I'd say at least 4 or 5 different law firms. And we're trying to get a better handle on, whether we get something out of it beyond just a headline, right? So, we've worked very hard in the city to deal with the scourge of opioid abuse. And we've put together a task force that has of many city agencies, police, health, EMS, and so forth, as well as agencies throughout Greater New Bedford to work on it. We've been making progress. Last year there was a 19% drop in overdoses in the city, so that's very encouraging, really encouraging. And there's more we can do. We're going to keep at it. And if I thought there was an opportunity to sue and actually get something out of it, then we would. A lot of cities have jumped into it, Barry, and they've signed up with plaintiffs' firms that whose effective fees might just suck up everything that they might recover. And so we're worried about that. We also don't want to be in a situation where we're devoting a tremendous amount of staff time to figure out exactly what the damages are. In the way of, the damages to the city could be things like time spent by ambulance crews and fire department personnel attending to folks who are ODing, for instance. Whether those people would have OD'd in the absence of the pharmaceutical companies promoting their products the way they did is an open question. So there are lots of questions to be asked. I'm not going to just do this. I mean, here's where I'm at. I directed my solicitor's office months ago to look at this, and we'll make a decision ultimately whether to sue based on whether it makes sense for the city and not just to grab a good political headline. It is a good headline. We're suing big pharma.
Well, legally, it's got to be very difficult to prove, right? I mean, how do you prove?
It's very difficult. Here's the way it's going to play out. It's going to settle at some point, right? Yeah. Like the tobacco cases did, and so forth, right? Some of that stuff ends up in trial, but these big class action suits end up settling, and in the course of it, the question is, okay, out of that settlement, is the city going to get much money at all? And given what a lot of these plaintiff firms are suggesting for fees, the answer so far is probably not much. And in the meantime, the city's going to spend an awful lot of staff time trying to track down answers to questions that are hard to know, like how much time have your ambulance drivers gone to scenes where there's somebody overdosing. You can get some of that data, but it's really hard to calculate, right down to how much it costs the city per person, right? You have an ambulance driver who makes X an hour and he spends 1 hour doing it on one night. Well, then, you add that to the tab. So again,
But even then, how do you prove that
it's very hard.
the person that OD'd on
because
company
because the
X's
company
medication, right?
was promoting it the wrong way. Those are left to juries, and some and in the case they're not dissimilar from the big tobacco cases against the cigarette companies, right? And some of those cases went to trial, and the cigarette companies won some, they lost some, but by and large, it's a hard thing to prove that somebody who was smoking cigarettes from the age of 15 on and got lung cancer, would have made an awful lot more money if, in the course of his or her professional life, if they hadn't started smoking and died young. I mean, that's just a very hard thing to prove.
Right.
But it doesn't stop people from suing. All I'm saying is that in this particular case, we want to make sure that the city is going about it in a logical way. It's our city's money. It's when you get right down to it, and as we always do, we make these judgments very carefully.
On a related matter, there was a hearing on Beacon Hill yesterday on a bill that appears to be really going nowhere at this point that would call for these safe injection locations. We've talked about that here before. The author of the bill suggests that two things have to happen in order for this to become law, and one has to be that you have to have an organization willing to do the injecting of the drugs, and you have to have a municipality that's willing to step up and say, yeah, you can do it here. And this is something that
don't count us in.
Yeah, this is something that you've roundly rejected in the past. You're not anxious to do that here.
No. There are other ways to deal with the opioid problem, and we are using those ways. And it looks like we're putting a dent in things. As I said, there was a 19% drop in overdoses last year. The idea of a injection site has lots of problems, one of which is the fact that I can guarantee you if you set up one of those things, you will have heroin dealers setting up right around in the parking lot waiting for their customers to come out. Why not? They're in the sales business, and they will go where the sales are likely to be. But more fundamentally, we're trying to convince children to avoid opioids and drugs generally, like the plague, and it's just kind of hard to square that message with actively facilitating the use of drugs. I just for me that's just that inconsistency is hard to get over.
Then you got the marijuana thing, where that's going to be okay, and I guess the CCC, Cannabis Control Commission, voted yesterday to make all legally sold marijuana products, whether they be edibles or whatever, in Massachusetts, contain a warning label, basically. I guess they're going to have two different marijuana leaves on them, in bright red and I think some black or whatever, suggesting that this product contains THC and that it's not safe for children. It's dangerous to children. Is that enough, do you think? I mean, forever cigarettes had warnings on the side too, right? And people still smoked, including kids.
Yeah, that didn't do the trick.
Didn't do the trick.
No, there has to be public messaging around it. Yeah, I mean, look, it's this the stuff with how we're going to regulate in the state the sale of non-prescription marijuana is unfolding, and there are lots of issues that we've talked about having to do with zoning and what kinds of products can be sold here, and to my mind. It's the law has passed, and we want to make sure that where the retail establishments set up, they set up in appropriate places in our city and are not by schools and churches and other sensitive areas, as we've discussed before. And so, hopefully the Cannabis Control Commission is going to wrap up its work soon, so that at the municipal level we can get down to the business of figuring out those issues.
City all recovered from last week's storm?
Well, as of this morning, everybody's power is back on.
Wow.
At least that's what was reported to me by Brian Nobriga, our emergency management director, who's doing a really terrific job. That he got that information from Eversource. We had the city had about 2,000 customers without power, and we had a couple of areas that we were concerned about, especially up in Sassaquin. A lot of residents there who lost power, but also, there are 3 nursing homes up there that lost power, and that had to go on generators. And so we were making preparations to deal with to deal with that. It's hard to move people in nursing homes, especially folks who are on dialysis, as some of them are. And so, you know, we want to make sure that, you know, when the next storm hits, that, you know, they are prepared and we are prepared to deal with you know, with those issues. They're not easy to deal with, but I'd like to see in certain places around critical facilities is some help from Eversource in establishing microgrids. These are grids that sort of stand off the main grid, and when the power goes out, they can snap back on. So, you know, we have that at St. Luke's Hospital, for instance. You know, they have their own generator. The lights go right back on when everybody else's goes out. So around critical facilities, as you know, we get more and more big storms. You know, we saw a lot of that in this past summer in Houston and South Florida and Puerto Rico. Yeah. It's called big weather, and we just need to be, you know, better prepared to deal with those things. So we've you know, had some discussions about it with Eversource around microgrids, and just so that we can have, you know, a greater degree of reliability when it comes to restoring power.
All right, let's take a break. 508-996-0500. We've had some folks that have been hanging on since the beginning of the show.
All right, I'm ready.
Chomping at the bit, so they must have some potholes in their neighborhood, right?
Whatever it is, I'm here.
He's here. He's ready. He's ready to answer. So get online, 508-996-0500. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the program. We've got Midweek with the Mayor in full swing here. Mayor Jon Mitchell is with us, and we have a lot of folks who want to chat with you, Mayor.
I'm ready.
It's all your fault. You did it.
It's always the mayor's fault.
Always your fault. 508-996-0500. Thanks for hanging on. You're first with the Mayor. Go ahead.
Hi, John.
Hey, Mike. How are you?
How you doing? Well, yeah, I'm all right. After last night's vote at the city council on the golf course, could you explain to first of all what happens? That vote might have scared Bruce Carlson off, you know. And could you explain to the listeners what would happen if he says, hey, he washes his hands of the whole thing, and what happened last night at the council? Could you explain to the listeners? And could you also single out the obstructionist on that vote? I'll be listening.
Mike, that's like 4 questions.
You want to take them in any special order?
So just so people have an understanding what he's referring to, and I'm not going to do it justice because I have to confess, it's not clear in my head exactly what happened in the city council last night concerning the vote on the new golf course contract. But let me just offer a little bit of context. So Johnson Management, which has been managing the golf course for, 15 years now or so, roughly, decided to exercise its ability to get out of the contract. This was back in the fall, or November or October, thereabouts, a few months ago. And so we've had to put it back out to bid. Johnson's getting out because it was losing money. And so we put it back out to bid. That is to say, the right to operate the golf course, to pay the city to operate the golf course. And we got one bid back from a gentleman named Bruce Carlson, who's a very experienced golf management pro and very well respected. So because it is a long-term contract, I believe, I'm sorry if I get this wrong, it's either 5 or 10 years. It's not as long as the last contract with Johnson. It has to go before the city council for approval. And last night there were some parliamentary maneuvers in the city council to delay the vote. And I don't want to characterize it, because I want the city council to go right back at it as soon as possible to make sure that we don't lose this contract, because there was just one bidder in the request for proposals to run the golf course. I've asked, I'm going to be, once I get off the air, I'm going to be calling Mr. Carlson and say to him, hey, look, please be patient. We're going to continue to talk to the city council. We briefed the city council on the nature of the contract, and we want to make sure that you can come here and operate the golf course and that the golfers can use it. So the city council is going to take it up again next week, and hopefully everything will go okay. We're going to continue to talk to them, make sure that it does, and so that they're fully informed about the contract, although we've certainly been doing that right up to this point. And then hopefully people can get out and golf. I guess if there's a silver lining to any of this, it's, well, the weather's been lousy and there aren't too many people out there golfing, but soon enough,
no winter
God
golf?
willing, the weather will get better and people will be out there on the course.
I know when I lived up in Vermont, they golfed with orange golf balls in the snow. So.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking about contracts, April 23rd, there's a deadline for the wind industry. What's that all about?
Well, that's the big first procurement of offshore wind energy. And this comes out of the renewable energy bill that was passed in 2016. So what that bill provided was, among other things, that the state's utilities will be required between the time of the act was signed in 2027 to procure 1,600, total of 1,600 megawatts of offshore wind generated electricity. What this does, the reason this is significant, and it is significant, is that it creates the market for offshore wind electricity. It ensures there's a buyer, and so for them, for the developers, that means knowing that there's a buyer, they can go out and invest, make the huge capital investments to build wind farms off of our coast. The first one, whoever wins it, will be building a multi-billion-dollar project. It will be, whoever gets it, will be making the largest private investment in the state's history. The record now is the Wynn Casino in Boston. This will be a bigger investment than that. So, and it'll be staged out in New Bedford. So it's really good news. And so once that procurement happens in April, it's scheduled for April, and hopefully it'll remain on schedule. But whenever exactly it happens, then you'll start to see some more business activity here, more work being done out in New Bedford, and it'll ramp up from there. And
we've already got some of the companies that are interested in this located here, right?
We have all three major wind developers have set up offices in the downtown, and they're going to be doing more. We're not going to, just so people understand, we're not going to see windmills on our waterfront for another 3 or 4 years. It takes a while for all this stuff to ramp up, but once it happens, it's going to be a regular thing on the waterfront.
Mm-hmm. So April 23rd is a very important date for the city.
It is. If it stays on schedule, it is. It will mark the start of full-scale offshore wind, of the full-scale offshore wind industry in the United States.
All right, 508-996-0500. You're up next with the mayor. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Mayor, you mentioned before that you want people to know that New Bedford is one of the most profitable seaports in the country, which it is, behind Alaska, Dutch Harbor. Even though Dutch Harbor brings a lot more fish weight-wise, but they don't have the scallop industry. But
Well, we bring in more dollars. I mean, our catches,
well,
landings
that's
are
what I'm
worth
talking.
more.
My question is, last year New Bedford brought over a little over $320 million in seafood into New Bedford. Okay? My question is, if we're such a rich seaport for the 16th time in a year, I mean, the last 16 times, okay, why is New Bedford still one of the poorest cities in Massachusetts? That's my question. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for the call. Appreciate it.
I think there are lots of reasons why New Bedford is not as affluent as other parts of Massachusetts. If you compare us to the Boston, and Boston has been prospering for 200 years, and it's prospering because it has a very large, diversified metropolitan economy that is anchored by major institutions. If you have Harvard and MIT in your backyard, it is pretty easy, pretty straightforward to build a strong economy, regional economy. Daniel Patrick Moynihan, the former senator from New York, who was a real thoughtful, thought-provoking guy, said that if you want to build, he joked, he said, if you want to build a strong regional economy, build a world-class university and wait 200 years. Right, so you get but it's an overstatement, right? But it makes the point, which is, cities take time to build. They take time, and that's why we've all been about the long term. And New Bedford has had its ups and downs over the years. The whaling industry, when New Bedford was really not a city yet, but a town of some 10 to 15,000 people, did very well, and that crashed, and New Bedford basically had to start over again. It started over again as a textile concentrated city, and when that crashed because it wasn't diversified, it had to start over again, bringing in more manufacturing, and the fishing industry had to ramp up. What we're trying to do now, Barry, is to say, what do we do really well, and how do we build off of that? So with fishing, whether it's whatever, our sweet spot is in the port. Yeah, sweet spot also is in the downtown and the cultural institutions that are there and the art scene. These are things that we do better than other places, and that's why we have competitive advantages.
I think with the logic,
that's how you do it. We're not going to sort of build something, a rail line, a casino, or one of these one-off projects and say, hallelujah, we're the land of milk and honey.
I think what the caller was asking you, though, I'm not sure if you missed the point, but I think what
maybe I did.
With all of the money that comes in annually from the fishing industry, he wants to know, where is it? I mean, you would think that the streets would be lined with gold, a lot of investment in the community, a lot of people with money to spend that are out there spending a whole lot of money. And I think that's what the question is that he was asking. Where does money go?
Well,
once
it does get
comes
spent,
in?
but it's we're a decent-sized city. We're a city of 100,000, and it's 300. So, I mean, just to put $320 million of landings in perspective, the city's budget is $360 million, right? Understand that. The school department's budget is like 130. So, I mean, you start talking these numbers, you can start to think about scale. It's a big industry, but we need other big industries to grow here, and that takes time. And the way you grow them is you make sure that you build off of the assets.
Well, how much
of
that $325 million annually is like absorbed in our local economy? How much of it leaves and goes into somebody else's economy? I think that's
so. The port itself generates about a little over $3 billion in direct economic activity, right? So that includes the processors. It includes everybody else that's doing business on the waterfront. When you talk about multiplier effects and what it means for the broader economy, the amount of induced economic activity is about 9.8 million. That's according to the study that was done last year.
So that's what stays here?
That's what induces activity here, emanating outward from the economic activity here. More than most places, the capital in the industry is local, right? So, if you look at some of our manufacturers, Titleist is owned effectively by investors in Korea, right? Joseph Abboud Suits is owned by a publicly traded company, the Men's Warehouse, right? And so, that ownership lies elsewhere. It's and that means the capital lies elsewhere. With the fishing industry, the major players in the fishing industry here largely live around Greater New Bedford, not necessarily in the city itself, but if you look at like Eastern Fisheries and some of the other ones, I mean, those are local folks. That's actually a good thing. So it means that a lot of the profits stay here.
All right, 508-996-0500. You're up next with the mayor. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mayor.
Good afternoon.
I'm not going to tell you about a pothole because some people got more important things to tell you.
Hey, potholes. I don't want to discourage anybody. Potholes are important to me. That was
Yeah,
Barry.
I know,
that was
but,
Barry that said that. That wasn't me.
Yeah, I know Barry said it. That's why I said it. Coming down Middle Street between the courthouse and the Social Security building, when you get to that intersection there where the post office is and the cars are coming from the octopus, I've called like so many months now about this. Traffic Commission won't even call me back, the guy in charge. I called your office an hour ago and explained it to the secretary. Cars every day, day and night, are making a left onto the street where you're coming from the octopus the wrong way. There is one-way sign on a pole on the post office side, but nothing when you look to the left at that intersection. So there's no do not enter, no nothing.
Wait, so you're saying if your car is traveling on Middle Street, people are taking a left?
Yes, if you're traveling down Middle Street and you get to the stop sign, they're taking constant lefts onto the going north on the road that comes from the octopus going south. And just about an hour ago, a Peter Pan bus had to stop abruptly because there was a car coming.
All right, we'll take
and everybody had to wait for the car to turn.
All right, I'll tell you what. Let me hold you right there and let the mayor respond because we're almost out of time. I'm going to get to another question.
I appreciate his flagging it for us, and we'll go ahead and take a look at it. Yeah, that sounds like that's a bad accident waiting to happen.
Absolutely. 508-996-0500. You're up next with the mayor. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad I can get in. Mr. Mayor.
Al, I'm ready for you.
Okay, here's the deal. At the Bank of America, there was a street light there once upon a time before the construction started on 18 South.
We're talking about Bank of America on Cove Street, right?
Yes. That street light needs to be put back. 18 South needs to be relighted. It's pitch black at night. That's a safety hazard. There's another street light that needs to be replaced on the corner of Morton Court and Cove Street to light up the crosswalk for Mihong Restaurant.
Yep.
And the parking lot has a floodlight there. It's not working.
Okay.
That also needs to be addressed.
Al, why did you never run for city council?
I thought about it.
You should. You do a good job.
You would have cleaned up.
Hey, Al, John's writing all of this down over here, and they're going to get to it. Appreciate it, Al. Thank you.
Thanks,
as always.
Al.
All right, you're next on WBSM. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Mayor, your voice sounds, you are excited about New Bedford. It seems like everything is going good for you. But one thing I don't understand, my house went up over $1,300 in taxes. On Christmas Day, I had problems with the sewage. I was working on that when everybody was every day nice meal. On the 1st of February, around that, again, back sewage. The cellar was full of water. 2 weeks later, again. So all these problems. There's a bar room close to my house on the summer. That's ridiculous. And there was a gentleman saying there's a lot of people very poor over here. When I bought this house, I had a lot of people who wanted to work. Now I have a hard time finding people who work. And the ones who work, they don't do the job right. Sometimes they want the money, but they don't want to do the work. I have a hard time with that. Anyway, now, with this storm, I thought I had a roof would last me at least 25 years. Maybe I was done 10 or 12 years ago.
Ma'am, can you get to your question because I'm out of time?
Okay. My question is, why in the world the house going so up? We are having so many problems, and why you have to pay so much money?
All right, why are the taxes going up? All this lady's got so many problems.
It sounds like she had an issue with the sewerage on Christmas Day, which is that could not have been pleasant. I would encourage her to call the mayor's office, so 508-979-1410, and let's get that fixed. And we could talk about municipal finances till the cows come home, but I just want to make sure, and it's legitimate for sure, But I just want to make sure that she's getting that problem attended to right away.
All right, we've got about 30 seconds left. New Bedford is hosting the International Seafood Buyers Association on Friday.
Well, we're hosting part of it. They have, Boston gets to host this major, the major seafood conference in North America, even though they don't do too much fishing in Boston. But some of the folks who go to that, especially from China and some other Asian countries, come down to New Bedford to visit our processors, and we'll host them again.
Very good. Mayor, appreciate it.
Sounds good. See you tomorrow.
Talk to you soon. Thank you very much. All right, Mayor Jon Mitchell, Midweek with the Mayor, goes by real quick as always. We're going to come back right after the news. The rain has begun. We'll be back after the news with your calls on some local issues and some other stuff too, so stay with us. You're listening to WBSM.